Am I okay to be back now?
Yes, you are, Scott.
Okay.
Welcome. And staff, you can join us now.
Okay, we are live on YouTube and recording, so we are good to go. And I guess I should make my statement. Before we get started, for the public record, we were just in executive session. There was a motion and roll call vote to both enter and exit this session. Thank you.
All right, and we've already done our roll call, so we can move right into our regular meeting of the Oxford City Council for Tuesday, February 2nd. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Snavely. I have a second.
Seconded.
Second by Councilor Southard. Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll to approve the agenda?
Mr. Bracken.
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby.
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge.
Yes.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Mr. Snavely.
Yes.
Ms. Southard.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, we'll move to public participation, and we will start tonight with appointments to boards and commissions.
I would like to make a motion to appoint the following individuals to the Environmental Commission for a 4-year term, Justin Fain. To Housing Advisory Commission, also 4-year terms, Eugene Scharf and Scott Webb. And Planning Commission, temporary for David Prithridge.
All right, may I have a second?
Seconded.
Second by Councilor Southard. Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Ellerby.
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge.
Yes.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Mr. Snavely.
Yes.
Ms. Southard.
Yes.
Mr. Bracken.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, we will move on to public comments. Anyone wishing to address council about items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda, please state your name and address for the record. Mr. City Manager, do we have any public comments?
I do not see any.
All
Oh,
right.
there's one. My apologies, there's one. Ms. McCleary, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'm Emily McCleary. I'm a Miami University student, and I was recently elected to serve as our Associated Student Government Secretary for Off-Campus Affairs. So I just wanted to come in and introduce myself to all of you. I sit on SCRC, so I've already met with Councilor Ellerby and done some work for the commission. Something that I'm really passionate about working on right now is making sure that renters' rights education is more accessible to our off-campus students and that they're able to access our health and wellness resources more easily. So I just wanted to introduce myself and let you guys know what I was working on. So thank you.
All right, thanks for coming tonight. We look forward to seeing you. Anybody else?
I do not see any at this time.
All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Snavely, second. Second by Councilor Southard. Any items to be removed tonight? All right, seeing none. Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Prithridge.
Yes.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Mr. Snavely.
Yes.
Ms. Southard.
Yes.
Mr. Bracken.
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, we will move on to resolutions. Ms. Eaton, you may read the first resolution whenever you're ready.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Oxford, Ohio, to recognize the Republic of Artsakh.
Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Ellerby. Do I have a second? Second by Councilor Bracken. All right, I will go to, don't really have a petitioner, so I will open this up to public comment.
Glenn should be able to start since
Okay,
he,
go ahead.
Yeah,
Glenn, we can do that.
This resolution came about through a discussion in the Student Community Relations Commission. We had a presentation there with the two individuals that are in the attendees right now, Teresa and Andrew, and they described the plight of the ARTSOC residents. And if possible, I would love to have them give that presentation right now.
All right, we can open it up to public comments.
All right, Andra and Teresa, I'm going to promote you to panelists to share about this resolution. Okay, you've both been promoted.
Wonderful. Hi. I had no idea how that was going to work. How's everyone doing? Like we were introduced, my name is Andrew DeVedjon, and my colleague is Teresa. I would like to begin by thanking you all for the opportunity to speak on something that both Teresa and I are very passionate about. We represent both members of the Oxford community and Miami students who are a part of a movement known as the Armenians for Student Rights. So we do not have a semester-long course to go through all of the history and everything that's happening in the Middle East in Armenian ARTSOC. But my hope through this presentation is 4 questions are answered with all of you. And that's number 1, where's ARTSOC? What is it? What's its relationship to Armenia? Where exactly to ground us geographically? Number 2, what are some key dates and places and ideas to kind of keep at the back of your head? Number 3, what happened in 2020 that prompted us to have this discussion and bring this resolution to the City Council? And number 4, why does any of this matter? Why did we bring this resolution? So I'm going to throw it over to Teresa to kind of ground us geographically and then present some few dates, and she's going to volley it back over to me so I can talk a little bit about what happened in 2020.
All right. Hi, guys. My name is Teresa Niev. If it is all right, I would like to share my screen just to show you guys a little bit of geography so I can pair that a little bit with the historical background. Okay. Can everyone see that? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right, so as you can see here, we have it's just a generic map of the Middle East / Eastern Europe. So right here, I'm sure you can see my cursor. This is Armenia, this is Azerbaijan, and the space in the middle is the land that we're talking about, ARTSOC. This is Turkey. Turkey will play a big role as well. So I'm going to start in 1915. So in 1915, there was a genocide, specifically the Armenian genocide. And that began when Turkish troops and the Turkish government orchestrated mass killings of Armenian people. So Armenian is a very small land mass, as you can see. They don't have a lot of military, they don't have a lot of troops, and the remaining troops that they have today are very young because they haven't had a chance to build up their generations since then. So as you can imagine, this was very, very tragic for Armenia. In fact, it displaced, I think it was approximately 1.5 million Armenians from the state actor of Armenia. So fast forward, the USSR falls, and this entire area of land is kind of in disarray. And Armenia finds itself both at odds with Turkey, whom it's had a history with, and also Azerbaijan, its neighbor. And Turkey has a lot of influence on Azerbaijan. So you can see why that would go awry. Now, Armenia and Turkey have a source of conflict, and that is this land in between, ARTSOC. The majority population of ARTSOC is Armenian. So when the USSR fell and broke apart, ARTSOC voted for sovereignty to decide where it should become a part of. Now, because it's primarily Armenian, it favored Armenia. So you can see why Azerbaijan would have a major problem with that. So that led once again to mass killings of Armenians, known as pogroms. And in specific, major cities were hit. Major cities such as Baku, which is right here, where a lot of Armenians lived at the time. They, Armenians and the Azerbaijanians, there was no discrimination as to what land. It's not like over here. It's not like, oh, you're from America, you're American. It's whatever heritage you identified as, but you could be born in either country. So there was a mass killing of Armenians here in Baku, in the Baku pogrom. There was mass killings of Armenians here in Yerevan. Essentially, in either state, in the major cities, there were mass killings of Armenians, of white Christian Armenians. Yeah, so as you can see, we have a very, very long history of Armenians just kind of falling at the hands of their neighbors and having these really big conflicts with their neighbors. And that kind of brings us to today, to 2020. So I'm going to pass this back off to, if I can, to Andrew.
Beautiful. Thank you, Teresa. So that's the context of the history that we're operating in. And I wanted to point out, once again, stressing what the vote happened when the Soviet Union fell. The people of Artsakh, vast majority, I'm talking like 95% of the residents, voted for sovereignty, that they wanted to be known as the Republic of Artsakh, not as Armenian, not as a part of Armenia, not as a part of Azerbaijan, but as their own republic. But the Azerbaijani government laid claim to that area. So they didn't really like that proposition that they should be sovereign. So there was a mini conflict like Teresa was talking about in the 90s, where the Artsakh and Armenian army were able to push back Azerbaijan and lay claim to the sovereign state of Artsakh. So from 1993 to 2020, Artsakh operated as a sovereign nation. It built schools, it built farms, it built hotels, it had an economy, it had a president that they elected, it had parliamentarians. It was a full functioning democracy. Then September 2020 hits. Azerbaijan, once again, seeing that Artsakh is theirs in their eyes, they decide to invade. It's in the midst of this pandemic. It's in the midst of political crises that are happening all over the world. It seems like a perfect opportunity. When they invade, Armenia comes to the aid of Artsakh, but at no point was this a fair fight. Artsakh and Armenian armies were outnumbered 6-1. The military apparatus of Azerbaijan was almost 8 times larger than Armenian Artsakh combined. On top of that, Azerbaijan went to Turkey, the perpetrators of the 1915 genocide, and who are their allies, and said, hey, can you help us out with this? And Turkey happily obliged. They provided military support 36 times that of Armenia and Artsakh. So over the course of about a month and a half, war crime after war crime after war crime is being committed. Turkey brings in Syrian mercenaries to kill Armenians by $100 a head. Azerbaijan, they start bombing churches, and Armenia is the first Christian nation, so these are churches from hundreds of years ago. They bomb mask factories, they bomb hospitals, and they bomb schools. There's videos of Azerbaijani soldiers taking Armenian citizens in Artsakh and torturing them and laughing. And I do apologize for being vile, but this is the facts of the situation. And this went on for about a month and a half. The Armenian and Artsakh military is being pummeled. And this leads to the Armenian prime minister entering into an agreement with the president of Azerbaijan and the president of Russia, Putin, to broker a deal that gives away 60% of Artsakh. So what happens with all these war crimes? They're unanswered. And on top of that, Azerbaijan gets 60% of the land. And now, right, on February 2nd, 2021, you have thousands of refugees from Artsakh who are fleeing to Armenia. They burn their homes because they would rather burn their homes than give it to the Azeri soldiers. They dug up their dead because there was reports during that month and a half of graves being desecrated. And about 26,000 students, children, are who should be in school are refugees. So this is the facts of what's happening right now in this random corner of the world. And the reason why it matters is two main things. Number one is that there's members of the Oxford community who are Armenian. We're small, but there are members of the community who are Armenian and are traumatized from these events. And we've been able to work with other activists and other students and other residents of the Oxford community to realize, like, this is a problem. And we would like our elected officials, specifically on the local level, to recognize this problem, condemn the actions of the Azerbaijani government, and recognize the sovereignty of Artsakh. So that's kind of on a local grassroots level. But then the second reason why this matters is that this is a question of democracy. This is a question of the rule of law. This is a question of sovereignty and self-determination, all these values that this country was founded on. So we're asking for this resolution to be passed as a testament to those ideals, that no matter where it is in the world, this matters. These ideas matters, and they will not be undermined. And that's why we urge all of you, and we really do with our hearts on our sleeve, we ask you to adopt this resolution, and which will give hope to, I'm not kidding, thousands of Armenians all over the country, and specifically the two Armenians who are in this Zoom meeting today. So with that, I would love to open it up for questions. I want everyone to be aware of what's going on. So if there's any confusion, please ask away.
All right. Vice Mayor Snavely.
Yeah, what was the U.S. government's response to all of this, and have they recognized Artsakh?
So currently there are no UN member states that have recognized Artsakh. That does not mean that cities like the city of Oxford around the world have done such. For instance, LA, they have, in Los Angeles, they've recognized Artsakh. And so there's a bunch of different ordinances that have. While this was happening, this was actually a strategic time for the Azerbaijani government to invade because it was in the middle of the US election. So there was all of these things that were happening within the world that a response, and that was also the cover of the pandemic, a response wasn't really met. Former President Trump, he did make a few statements and they did try to broker a few deals to create ceasefires. But there was about 3 ceasefires that were brokered, one of which was brokered by the United States. Each one was broken. There was claims on both sides of you fired, no, you fired. But I want to once again remind all of you the difference in military strength. Why would the Armenian government and the Artsakh government break a peace when they have such little military capacity next to Azerbaijan? So it was a very limited response as it stood at that time.
All right.
Any other questions?
All right. I am seeing.
Yeah.
Councilor
The way the resolution is written, it is not condemning the genocide that we know occurred. We know the history, and it is appalling. It's dreadful. And I am deeply aware of that. But that is not what this resolution is about. And I think that it's very important that we understand that it is separable and that it is not part of this resolution. And, so I think one of the questions here is why the city of Oxford, and I've been asked this, I mean, this came in comments from people, why would the city of Oxford devote time to an international question when our mandate is really for the local citizens? And secondly, the other question that people have asked me is, do we have a list of other nations that the city formally recognizes? Which I think the answer is no. Oxford, as far as I know, we're not in the business of recognizing sovereign countries. So that is, I think, the issue surrounding this resolution. And whatever is decided by this council, I really, really hope that you will continue talking and continue, working in many ways to let people know what history is and what can happen. And, it's about time that the Turkish government recognize what they have done So that's enough, but those are separate things. So I just wanted to say that. And then that's all I have to say. Yeah.
Councillor Raghu.
I mean, I think that the people talking about this and bringing this forward know that Oxford isn't going to change a whole lot, but it can help with education and also help contribute to maybe other cities or states or countries taking heed. So although I think it's weird for us to, focus on a more international front, I think that this is important, and I commend you and Glenn for bringing this forward and helping to educate.
Thank you. One note that I want to say on the international front is I fully am aware. I wonder how many resolutions like this, if at all, have been brought to the Oxford City Council in the past. Probably none, probably zero, right? But that doesn't mean that it's a start, right? The reason why we're bringing this, while it seems like this crazy international conflict halfway across the world, it's affecting the members of our community, right? We brought it for that reason. And it's not just for the Armenians, it's other members of the community who are traumatized by these actions across history. And recognizing the sovereignty of Artsakh, while it might seem like a very small thing, a piece of paper in a small town in Ohio, what exactly does this mean? It's not going to give back the lands overnight, but it sends a strong message that once again, you cannot undermine democracy. In areas all around the world, they recognize that fact, whether it's at the federal level or even at the local level. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Right. And we know, I mean, there's other genocides happening. There's a genocide in China that is really horrible. But we know that, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So completely support you. I hope that this helps.
Councillor Prithrick.
So yeah, I want to commend you guys for your commitment to this and for educating us about this. I think most of us were not as familiar with this as we probably ought to have been. I guess I would say with this is that I really would like to stand in solidarity against this kind of violence, whether the city of Oxford is in the position of recognizing the sovereignty of other countries. And to be honest, do I or any of us have enough information to make that judgment? I mean, I know from, I spent my dissertation researches in Catalan-speaking Spain, and the politics and history are complicated and go back hundreds, if not thousands of years. So I'm not in a position to even, I'm becoming introduced to this issue. So I don't have a problem with the resolution. I think I'm wonderful to stand with it. I guess I would prefer to stand with it minus section 1, because I would be happy to stand in solidarity against the violence and recognize that there are politics, but I just am not in a position to make a decision one way or the other about recognizing or whether that's right or best. So I would like to stand in solidarity, but not get into international geopolitics where I'm just not educated enough to make an educated decision.
And just as a...
I just wanted to commend both of you for coming to us. And I will tell you one thing that it did is that it caused me to go into about 2 days worth of research on Artsakh, and I found out exactly where it was. I found, so I've read all about the information that you've brought forward. I think I'm, we will discuss it later, but regardless of what happens, I want you to know that we stand with you and that we certainly empathize with the difficulty that you all are facing.
Thank you.
And just as a side note, it may seem a little bit random that we would be part of the Oxford community and yet be talking about something that seems so foreign. But actually, I'm a first-generation American, and I think Andrew is also a first-generation American. Our parents are actually from Armenia, and those pogroms that I was talking about, they happened in the 1990s, the late 1980s, early 1990s. So they actually displaced our family and they brought us here, which is why we're able to speak to you guys as a council at all. So that's what we mean when we say it impacts your guys' community. It's not just like two kids that are, desperately clinging to their background, or their heritage. We're actually really we're connected to this, and we go home and we talk about this with our parents, and they say, oh my God, look that pillar. I grew up by that pillar. It's gone now. It's removed now. So just as a little bit more context.
You should know that I am also a refugee. I'm also brought here by my parents who are refugees. And, I'm the only member of city council who is a naturalized American. So that may make you feel good about, what it means to be a citizen of this country. And I'm proud that I am on city council and am able to, participate in a free election and was elected in a free election. And, it was a great moment when I was elected. So I encourage you to continue to speak and continue to be involved in local government.
All right. Well, again, I thank you both for coming. If there are no further council comments or discussion, I see Mr. Ellerby.
Yeah, I just wanted to add just a final thought. So last year, we talked a lot about equity and justice. And when I found out about this, it was new to me as well when they made that presentation in the Student Community Relations Commission, and like the fact that they brought it there as students to air that out with the students and the community. I thought, they're participating in the political process. They deserve an ear. So once I found out about that and the hardships that those groups of people have endured, it hit a little different with me because I resonate with a group of people that have been mistreated pretty much regularly throughout their existence, and especially in modern times from the 90s up until now. And again, during 2020, there were things that were going on here in the United States that were displacing and disenfranchising groups of people. And when you hear about those kinds of things here, you want to recognize injustice anywhere. So, we recognize injustice here through symbolic resolutions and ordinances. I figured once I heard about that, I felt it would be a disservice to myself if I didn't make sure that it reached council and we acknowledge that same thing here.
All right.
Point of order, I think now that the public portion is done, council needs to talk about it before you go to a vote.
You can do that. All right. Council discussion.
So I guess I would, I am 100% in support. I guess to me, I might move that we just delete from section 1 and recognizes its sovereignty. And just because that's a business that I don't know enough about it but I think we can stand with solidarity. I'm in solidarity with people who have a republic and recognize. So to me, I'm 100% confident with that way. So that's my motion, is just to delete that last portion of section 1. So it would basically end at, and its citizens, period.
I second that, and for the same reason, I don't think it's a good precedent for the city council to begin involving themselves in international relations to the point of recognizing countries. So I don't know that we can go that far, but we certainly could, honor the republic and their citizens, and in section 2, recognize the adversity and strongly condemn human rights violations. I think that's certainly within our power and reasonableness.
All right. Councilor Ragu.
How does Teresa and Andrew feel about that?
Am I allowed to speak on that? I understand it. I understand the idea of an uncomfortable precedent. I do get it because there is no precedent. But if there's one thing that I can take away from my political science degree, I will say that there is no precedent until there is precedent, right? There's nothing like this before until it's presented. The only thing that I would present, again, I understand the uncomfortability of it. The only evidence, though, that I would present when it comes to understanding the sovereignty is the vote of the people. In the research, you look, 95% of people in the Republic in 1991, they wanted the sovereignty and it was taken away from them. And there is some UN resolutions against it, and there's a lot of noise on the subject. But when you get down to the weeds, it's the will of the people. It's the ideals that we think about when it comes to voting. I would respect and understand, and I'd like to also hear what Teresa's point is. There's also kind of a sense of you are honoring the citizens of the Republic of Artsakh, and that means something because you're seeing a lot of people in a lot of different countries who aren't even going that far. So I would thank the council for doing that much. But I would point back to that vote. And that idea of that there's not precedent until there is precedent. That at least my my understanding of it.
Yeah, I would just want to add to that by saying, I mean, the cell is, you get to be the first person to do that. You get to be the first person to say, this is wrong. And in every level of government, there's always going to be a reason to not do it. There's always going to be some red tape. There's always going to be some, well, if we do this, then we'll do that. If we do this, then we'll do that. But the reason that we bring it to you is because we're part of this community, not just this country. We're part of this community specifically. This is where we go to school. This is where we, strive for higher education, which is going to trampoline us for the rest of our lives. And it's going to be, we're going to make we're going to be the generation that kind of fuels the next generations and actually creates wealth for our families. So that would be the sell for you guys, but I totally understand going a different direction with it.
All right. So we have
we first need a vote on the amendment.
Yes.
And my comment is to my colleagues, if the amendment passes, I'm going to vote for the motion. And if the amendment fails, on a matter of principle, I'll have to vote against it, and I would rather vote for it.
All right. Let's.
Can I continue the discussion before we vote on the amendment?
All right, go ahead, Jason.
Thanks. I was just going to say this might be precedent setting locally, but it's not in terms of cities, which we've recognized. And there's 10 states that have recognized the Republic. And I could see us, if we haven't already in our history, seen other stuff through like this. For example, I could see us speaking on Tibet or Hong Kong or situations that maybe don't talk about borders, but Chantel mentioned the Uyghurs in China, I believe she was referencing to, and the Myanmar situation going on right now. There's all sorts of things that I don't mind us speaking on because, again, injustice anywhere is everywhere. That being said, if counselors want to hold off because they don't feel like they're in a position of knowledge and understanding to quite vote on the border situation, I understand that. But outside of that, I'm in support of this, and I prefer we leave it in than take it out.
I have a comment before we vote on the amendment. I kind of liken that part of the section like what Edna had added to our last resolution, because she had said, and I completely agreed with her, that we needed to name the problem and had added white supremacy specifically to
Anti-Semitism.
And anti-Semitism. Thank you. So I liken it to, that's uncomfortable to say that white supremacy is a problem. That is really hard to say. And you can see that in the way Miami made their resolution against the insurrection, that they did not list that. So I think that it's there with intention. And I understand why you're asking for it, and people want to have control over their own autonomy. So I'm in support of it.
Councilor Bracken.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add something to mine in that I think respect of sovereignty in this situation is much stronger in supporting the reduction in violence than simply calling for peace. Everybody called for peace, but that wasn't very effective in this situation. However, the more support they get for sovereignty means the more peace they can likely keep in the future. And we'll play a small part in that as a small city, but I would support it in that alone. So I'd prefer we keep both sections, but and also I would be open to an amendment that recognizes the genocide or other issues related to that too.
Okay.
I'm concerned about, I'm concerned about the city's time, the city's staff time. There's so much injustice in this world. We have so many things that are appalling and terrible, and I think that our jurisdiction is local. We are meant to serve the citizens here, the local, and we can't really solve the problems of the world. I wish we could. We can, but we, as you have all said, and I totally agree, we can condemn injustices and racism and the past genocide and the present genocides that are occurring. And I would only be interested in, only vote for this if it also included all the genocides and all the injustices that are occurring in the world. And I think that otherwise, I think we're out of our league and we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is solving local problems. That doesn't mean that I am in favor of we're separating out the issues, and I just am worried about us getting too involved in international politics when our local issues are so pressing and urgent.
Right. Councilor Prither, you're muted.
Yeah, I don't know that we can call a question on motion, but we do have a full agenda tonight, so I would love to have resolution. And I think we could talk about this, and I'm fully supportive of it. But I made a motion. I'd love to know what people think, so we could move forward to voting on the resolution in general.
Okay, let's take a vote on the amendment. So
explain again the amendment, please. It simply moves the 4 words and recognizes its sovereignty. Is that it?
Yeah, so we're basically expressing solidarity with the people and understanding the plight that they face and condemning the violence without wading into questions of recognizing sovereignty.
all right, so a yes removes the 4 words, a no leaves it the same. So
And then excuse me, that I would like to see. Okay, we can vote on that, but then I would like to have a second amendment.
all right, Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll on this amendment?
Ms. Ragu,
No.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
I would like to know if we determined that I'm okay to abstain from this portion.
Do you have a reason to abstain, or is it just
Well, in this situation, strategically, people have said they will not vote on it with the amendment. So knowing what it would turn out otherwise, I'd rather not contribute it to that, but just vote on the second portion. And I thought legally, I was allowed to abstain.
No, I think you're allowed to abstain. I just didn't know whether there was a reason other than not wanting to. Okay.
I'd rather not support either side in this because I care more about the end result getting through than possibly limiting.
Can we hear
that
from the
portion
law
here.
director on that question?
Frankly, I've never had this issue come up in the context of a council meeting. If this were a substantive resolution or ordinance, absent an ethical consideration or including a conflict of interest, abstention would not be appropriate. I look at this discussion a little differently because this is a statement of council that has to do with a policy position rather than a substantive ordinance or resolution. So for that reason, without doing some additional research, I'm going to defer an opinion. I typically don't do that, but this is one of those, frankly, I've never seen a situation quite like this in terms of point of order. Sorry for the vagueness of the answer.
Yeah, so if allowable, I will abstain, which is what I believe I just heard in deferment.
Mr. Ellerby,
No.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. Amendment is adopted.
I think Edna had an amendment she wanted to.
Okay, yeah, I would like to condemn human rights, just say in section 2, strongly condemns human rights violations, period. Whether they're carried out by the Azerbaijani government, whether they're carried out by the Turks, whoever they're carried out by, they should be condemned, period. So I move that the second section deletes carried out by the Azerbaijani government.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Questions or discussion? All right, Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll for our second amendment?
Mr. Snavely.
Of course, you'd start with me. I want to support Edna. I'll vote yes.
Ms. Southard.
Oops, yes.
Mr. Bracken.
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby.
No.
Mr. Prithridge.
Yes.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Second amendment is adopted. All right. If we have no further amendments or questions or discussion, then I see Mr. Bracken's hand.
I just wanted to say that just because we can't do everything doesn't mean we can't do anything. This is a small thing that, we're not sending a peacekeeping force from our staff over there. All we're doing is voting on this to put our support out there, right? So we're not taking up resources other than 20 extra minutes of my time, which I would gladly give, if not more, for causes like these. So I hope that's not a reason for us to limit ourselves on matters of justice, no matter where they're at.
All right, well said. All right, Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Southard.
Yes.
Mr. Bracken.
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby.
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge.
Yes.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Mr. Snavely.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. The resolution is adopted. I thank you both for coming. I think we've all learned a lot. Feel free to come anytime.
Andrew and Teresa, if you could put yourself back as a viewer, that'd be great. And Mayor Smith and council, I have a brief announcement. When people were logging on during the executive session, I hit the remove from meeting button. And what I've learned is that is like remove forever. And so some of our staff members are having a hard time getting back on, including Joe. And it seems like Casey and Sam have figured out maybe a personal email or something, but also Etta Reed. So my apologies. I can't quite figure it out very quickly. If you see me looking all around, that's what I've been trying to do.
Okay.
So there's that.
Does it make any sense to end this meeting and create a new one, or is it too late for that?
I think it might be too late. What I might do is go downstairs and see if Joe just wants to share my computer. So I might go do that.
Well, could you send them another email to invite them in, or?
I've already tried that a couple of times. I tried to have them use a public link, and I also resent their link. So this is our biggest snafu since March. I'm feeling okay, but it was one, who knew we were going to be learning more in January, but today's the day, I guess.
But it looks like you've got that Sam Perry and John Jones and Mike Dreisbach are there now.
Yes, but I'm still missing Joe. So I'm going to go see what I can do to help Joe, because he does have something on the agenda.
Okay.
My apologies.
All right. Carry on. All right. We will move on to our next resolution. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
Resolution committing the City of Oxford to a strategic planning model of governance, promoting transparency and accountability and progress towards long-range community goals and strategic priorities.
All right, motion to adopt. Councilor Southard, do I have a second? Second by Mr. Prithridge. And I will turn this over to Mr. Prithridge.
Okay, I'll try to be concise because I know we have a full agenda tonight. And this is just an outcome. Those of us in work session discussed this a few weeks ago. Basically, this is just trying to put down on paper some of the process that we've been settling upon over the past few years to how to translate long-term goals that we might specify, for example, in our comprehensive plan or capital improvement plans or other plans, into the yearly work of council and staff. And I think we've been doing a better and better job of that in terms of connecting our strategic planning to annual objectives and strategic objectives that we communicate with the public. And I think we're moving towards doing annual reporting where we can talk about how much progress have we made on those measurable objectives. So it's just basically putting down on paper so the citizens can know that we're committed to that kind of process, that the transparency in the process, they can kind of know how we're doing our work, that we're going to report back to them, and hopefully that we're making great progress on our goals. I don't think it binds us in anything. I mean, the best laid plans, right? Like you set long range goals, it doesn't mean you're always going to be able to work on them because things happen, like pandemic or whatever. And I think we've proven we're awesome at working through those challenges. But this is just, again, making that commitment to the public and to ourselves that we'll take on that responsibility. I know that's a direction that staff has already been really going in and has already been doing, but is even more committed to that. So anyway, I really appreciate the time and a conversation we had at work session. And I appreciate that our work as a group to try to make this part of our decision-making DNA. I believe it's just part of the goals we've been talking about communications and adopting a strategic planning model. So yeah, that's just, and we as counselors are not trying to specify exactly how staff is going to do its job, but these are just kind of spelling out our objectives as policymakers. And then, they will help us work through that schedule. So thank you.
All right. Assistant City Manager Green, is there anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council?
I do not see anyone.
All right. Council questions or discussion? All right. Seeing none, I will go to Ms. Eaton to call the roll.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. That resolution is adopted. We will move on to our third resolution. Ms. Eden, you may read it whenever you're ready.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Clark, Schaefer, Hackett and Company to prepare the financial section of the comprehensive annual financial report in accordance with the accounting principles generally accepted based on information provided by the City of Oxford's Finance Department.
All right. Motion to adopt.
Move adoption.
Adoption by Mr. Snavely, second.
Seconded.
Second by Councilor Southard. And I will turn this over. Well, I would turn it over to Mr. Newland. Oh, there he is. All right. Hey, Joe. You made it.
This is we are requesting approval to enter an agreement Clark, Schaefer, Hackett to prepare the CAFR for the financial statements the year ending 2020. City of Oxford has worked with Clark, Schaefer, Hackett and Company for 12 years for this purpose, successfully earning the excellence in financial reporting from the GFO with combined efforts of both the city and the firm. This is the first year it's gone over 20,000, so I needed to bring this to City Council. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Assistant City Manager, is there anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution?
There's not, thank you.
All right. Council questions or discussion? Councilor Ragu.
So is this something like the ClearGov or other type of software that could be helpful for generating the CAFR that would save money each time?
This is the firm that actually does the conversion for us. I've talked to ClearGov, and that's part of my goals for 2021 is to look into that, but I really don't believe it'd save the city money
Okay.
because of the cost of it, plus what we have to do for them to do the CAFR, and still have to contract with them for part of the money to be on the lookout to make sure we're following all the GASB rules, because those are hard to keep up with. And I've done this before, is contracted with another company to review when I did the financials. So I'm still in the process, or will be in the process of gathering that information. But at this time, I couldn't answer that with a clear answer.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? Councilor Prithridge.
This is just a clarification question that Joe, well, two questions. One, just to clarify, this is a relationship we've already had. So this is not a change other than the fact that because it goes over 20, it's before us, where in the past it hasn't. So they were a little bit behind the scenes. They were helping prepare those reports, and we just didn't necessarily see their name. So that's just a continuation of the award-winning CAFRs we've been doing. This is a question for, I guess, for Doug, which is that I was looking at the charter, and I was thinking about this idea of annual reporting, and it asks the city manager to prepare annual reportings of the city's activities. And then it talks about, in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code section. Is the CAFR that kind of, is that really the report on the annual activities, at least financial activities, that the Ohio Revised Code is talking about?
Doug, you're muted. Doug, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's one of our requirements. We're required by the state to do an audit. And we go further than that. We do a comprehensive financial report as part of our audit. And as Joe said, we're asking to hire Clark, Schaefer, and Hackett. In the past, I've been able to sign that agreement because it's been less than 20,000. This year it went under 20,000. And if I can, I'm going to just share some things with the public, and I'll be kind of quick. Joe mentioned that we have received an award. We've received this award for the past 36 years, and for our CAFR. And this is an honor by the GFOA. It's a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. It's judged by an impartial panel to meet these high standards of the program, which includes demonstrating a constructive spirit, a full disclosure to clarify, communicate its financial story, and motivate potential users and user groups to read the reports. And so it's the highest form of recognition that you can get in governmental accounting. And Joe and his staff are to be commended for putting forth this effort, because there's a lot of work that goes beyond what Clark, Schaefer, and Hackett does for us. And so I would encourage you to take some time to look at it. It's available on our website. We've archived probably since Joe and I have been here, those reports. And, I might share with you that not all the cities put forth the effort to do this. As a city manager, I know when I want to look at operations of other cities, the first thing I go for is the CAFR, because you can compare our performance to other cities and what we spend on different items. So, I thank Joe and his staff for doing it, and they're to be commended. Like I said, this is our 36th year to receive this recognition.
All right. Any other questions or discussion?
Congratulations on that for the achievement of this award.
Thank you. It's a group effort. Appreciate it.
All right, Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, that motion is adopted. We will move on to our fourth resolution. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Utility Truck Equipment Incorporated for the purchase of a new 40-foot aerial platform, truck body, and Ford F-550 cabin chassis at state contract pricing at a cost not to exceed $122,862.
All right, motion to adopt. Moved by Vice Mayor Savory. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Second by Counselor Southard. I'll turn this over to Mr. Dreisbach. You're still on mute, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. The city has $135,000 appropriated to replace our 21-year-old bucket truck. This machine's used almost on a daily basis. We use it for managing the urban forest, taking care of storm damage when we have broken limbs or downed trees. It's also used for traffic light maintenance, street light maintenance. We do tasks with flagpoles and maintain our buildings with this machine. So as I said, the existing machine has reached the end of its useful life. It's 21 years old. They've done an excellent job of maintaining this machine, but it would be very expensive to invest in what's needed to make it usable in the future. So again, this proposed machine is on state contract. It is slightly larger than our existing unit. This will have a 40-foot reach, where our existing unit, I believe, is 33 feet. This also has several more significant safety features that will help protect our staff, including the entire vehicle will be insulated from electric shock, and also have outriggers that will give more stability when working on a slope. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution?
There's not. Thank you.
All right. Council questions or discussion? All right. I also point out that this is very important in putting up and taking down the banners over High Street on a weekly basis. That's when I see it. So, and yeah, this truck is starting.
There must be a cat or two whose lives have been saved.
Better than ladders, that's for sure.
All right. All right, Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Prithridge.
Yes.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Mr. Snavely.
Yes.
Ms. Southard.
Yes.
Mr. Bracken.
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. That resolution is adopted. We will move on to our fifth resolution. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
A resolution declaring certain city property no longer needed for any municipal purpose as surplus upon the acceptance of new equipment and authorizing its advertisement and sale to the highest bidder by internet auction or by trade-in to utility truck equipment.
All right. Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Snavely. Second.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councilor Southard. And I'll go back to Mr. Dreisbach.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. This will be disposal of our 21-year-old bucket truck. We will look to offer this on GovDeals or some other internet auction site with a reserve. And the reserve will be whatever we're offered by the manufacturer on the trade-in. And we'll take the best offer that we can get to return those funds back to the city. Be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council?
There's not. Thank you.
All right. Council questions or discussion? All right. Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Mr. Snavely.
Yes.
Ms. Southard.
Yes.
Mr. Bracken.
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby.
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. That resolution is adopted. We will move on to our sixth and final resolution. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Larkin Greenwood Ford for the purchase of 2 Ford Interceptor utility vehicles with specified manufacturer installed options at state contract pricing at a cost not to exceed $71,768.
All right, motion to adopt.
Move adoption.
Moved by Vice Mayor Snavely, second. Second by Counselor Southard. All right, and I will turn this over to Chief Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is our typical replacement of police cruisers. We're down to 2. We normally come in and ask for 3, but 2 were approved in the capital improvement budget. So it's important for us to get these. With this, this is the Ford Interceptor utility vehicle. It's an SUV that you see a lot now. These are good vehicles for us to carry all the gear. We've been pleased with this vehicle. This year, we understand council, the importance of the environmental issues. So we're looking at a hybrid option. It is more expensive, but we think it'll reduce engine idle time when the vehicles are parked and have a fuel savings. So we're throwing that in as a possibility. It'll be about $3,500 more per car. And I asked Lieutenant Robinson to be here in case there's some technical questions. He went out and got the quotes, and I can always count on Glenn for some good technical questions. So,
all right, let me see if there's anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution.
There is not. Thank you.
All right, council questions and discussion. Mr. Ellerby.
It's 2 really easy ones. The hybrid option, those contain battery packs, correct?
yes, correct.
And then the service life on your average cruiser is 15 years?
Yeah, we keep them as frontline vehicles. We would like to keep them ideally for 10 years. We stretch them out to 12 here recently. You know, when we added officers to the schools, we have more officers, so we kind of need to stretch our cruisers a little bit more sometimes. So yeah, about a 12-year frontline vehicle.
And then an extra one, finally, the average mileage per day on one of those things is what, around like 30?
Lieutenant Robinson can jump in if he knows.
Yeah, that varies, but we guess or average them out to be about 10,000 miles per year. So when we retire a car after about 12 years, 13 years, we're right around the 120 to 130 average. Sometimes we go a little bit less. I have a couple cars that are quite a bit more, but on average, we're right around 120,000 miles at retirement.
Yeah, then the hybrid option makes sense, because if you guys are doing a lot of short range city type driving with a lot of stops and idles, then it's almost a no brainer at this point with that technology. Thanks.
Right, we're anxious to see how that goes. You know, the expectations of the batteries are 8 to 10 years. Fleets are estimating in 8 years on the police vehicles. We're going to have about half the yearly mileage that Ford puts on their specs per police car. So we're hoping to stretch that a little bit longer. This will be the first year for us. I think we're into a couple years now that Ford's had it. All the industry reports have been favorable, and hopefully it'll cut down on a lot of the idle time when you see cars parked in places to keep our radios up and keep our computers up. We have to keep that climate control going in the car, so that should help the process.
Right. Mr. Bracken.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the 2 vehicles that are being replaced, just like we had for the bucket truck right before this, will they be sold off in a future council meeting?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we'll do a separate resolution for to sell those. You know, it's going to take a while. If you approve this tonight, we won't get these cars till probably the fall, and then we have to upfit them. So then we'll come back with a resolution to sell. We typically go to Gov Deals. These are, I think, going to replace a couple old Crown Vics. So
That sounds great. And I just wanted to say that from my understanding, reading the studies, hybrids and the electric vehicles, not only will they pay off environmentally, but almost all of them now, almost under any condition, if they're coming out now, will pay off financially as well. So I approve.
Councilor Southard.
Yeah, of course, I'm in favor of the hybrid, and I'm glad that you, I appreciate that you looked into it and that you did the research and so on. And I don't think that $3,500 extra is a big problem. But I was wondering if you are sure that it has the appropriate pickup, because sometimes I know you have to get a quick start, and I want to be sure that you can do that and that you're safe.
Yeah, I think that's kind of always been a concern, a public safety vehicle. You want it to be, you don't want it to fail. But I think as technology is improving, you see this every day at an intersection now. You hear the cars shut off, come back on. So again, this is, Lieutenant Robinson dug into it. This is only, I think, the second or third year that Ford has had this. And, we've done our research because that is a big concern for us. We'll still have plenty of other traditional type vehicles, but if these are successful and we can continue to replace them with these vehicles, it'll be good for the long term.
Yeah, the Michigan State Patrol study, which they are the kind of the forefront of police car studies, actually rank these quicker, faster than their gasoline engine counterparts. So they provide more torque, quicker pickup, faster off the line as far as police cars go. So we're excited to try them out.
Good, thank you. I think that will reassure the public that, any people who might be uncertain that this is a good idea. It sounds like it's a very good idea. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Snavely.
Yeah, I agree with Edna's comments. And I've had my hybrid for 10 years, and it does accelerate as well or better than my gasoline counterparts that I see on the road. And, it stops when you're stopped and it starts right up again. So I think this is a really good choice.
All right. I'll too echo all the sentiments of my fellow counselors. I appreciate you guys doing the research. I think that's a great price from the state contract for 2 SUVs. So if we have no more comments, Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
With thanks to the lieutenant and the chief, yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. That resolution is adopted, and we will move on to ordinances tonight. We have one first reading. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
An ordinance accepting the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approving the preliminary planned development application for Lake Forest Phase 1 with conditions.
All right, and I believe Mr. Vice Mayor Snavely would like to recuse himself.
I would, on advice of our law director, I will recuse myself on this one.
All right, and I will turn this over to Mr. Perry.
Good evening, everyone. I'm bringing a recommendation tonight to you from the Planning Commission. So after a very thorough staff analysis and a Planning Commission review following that, we have a recommendation for you. And we cut our slide presentation in half since there was such a thorough review. And we do have some of the information available if needed. But we'll give you a quick overview. And Jessica, I don't know if you got my slides, but maybe you can put those on the screen if you're able to, and we'll just go through them in order. And then I've got Scott Webb is online as well from the applicant side of things. Thank you, Jessica. So this first slide, just you can go on to the next one. So the name of it is Lake Forest, and it's along Lake Forest Drive. Scott Webb was the applicant on behalf of Four Leaf Development. Jim Clausen is the representative of Four Leaf, and then Bear Becker, Etta Reed is the engineer that has worked on it. So 12 acres is the size of the area, zoned R2A, and the proposal is for 36 units. Next slide, please. So this slide here just gives you an overview of the overall area back actually before it was annexed into the city. This entire area was part of a planned development that was done in the county. And the site is at the furthest south extremity here. So the next slide. So this
Pardon me,
is
Sam. Mayor Smith, your hand is raised. Did you want to ask a question as we're going along?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That got pushed by accident. I'm good. Let me see if I
Okay,
can-
sorry, Sam, continue.
okay, thanks. So this slide just shows the development that has happened to date, absent the new roadway. But you can see level 27 in the annex, again, well beyond the site boundary, but within the overall plan development that was originally adopted by the county and then annexed into the city in 2006. Next slide. And this slide, finally, we get to the site boundary. So you can see the black line at the bottom, which shows you where this Lake Forest Phase 1 would be located and how it abuts the new roadway. So I don't know if you can see the faint line coming from 27 headed north along the southern boundary of the site, and how it tapers back up to South Point Parkway, where there was a cul-de-sac turnaround, but then now it's been made into a connection. So you can see how this is a continuation of the overall area that was intended for development back before it was annexed into the city. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the zoning. And as the first slide showed you, the zoning is R2A, which is single and two family residential. So the zoning has already been set for residential. And you can see how it covers both sides of the new roadway. That's not, unfortunately, not an aerial photo since it's so new, but it does bisect that R2A zone in that area. So next slide. So here we have a closer up shot showing the site area. This was previous to the roadway construction. So if you've driven the new roadway, you might have noticed that the edge of the pond has been relocated because of the roadway construction. Some of the trees have been removed because of the roadway construction. Actually, a lot of the trees in the area are dead, but this gives you an idea of where it's located. And you can see on the lower left-hand side of the screen is where that new intersection is, where there's a turn lane to turn left into the new roadway. Next slide. So here we have the first slide that shows the actual layout, which is what Planning Commission and staff have spent a lot of time on in analyzing and reviewing. And so on the right is data about the project. And so just to draw your attention a little bit to the middle section there that shows on the data where the allowed density would actually be 73 units. The proposal is 36. And so part of the reason for this whole plan development process is because some of the things that are being requested wouldn't be allowed by right for a traditional subdivision, which is fairly typical for a site like this that is challenging because of its orientation with the roadway and the stream. So it allows some opportunity for more creative development and alignment. There's not actual lots being proposed as part of this because of the orientation and the close proximity of the buildings to each other. So this is why it's not a traditional subdivision type of layout where there would be lots that are divided up and sold off for builders or individual homeowners. And there are lines between the houses, but that is more or less to show where it kind of simulates where the boundary would be. But the buyer of the home, the dwelling unit, would actually just own where their unit is, and then the land around them would be owned in common with what's called a HOA or homeowner association. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows you a rendering of what the buildings would look like, and 2 to 3 bedroom, 1 story or 1.5 story. And this is a preliminary plan, so these are not final. So this does give you an idea of what's intended, and that's typical for a planning commission to look at the intended type of buildings. And next slide. So I'll jump right into the conditions, and I'll start with the prelude that planning commission did find that it met the requirements of chapter 1145 in the zoning code, which is the plan development chapter for preliminary. There have been times where the planning commission has reviewed a preliminary and final together. That's not what was done with this. this was a preliminary by itself. So if the council wanted to approve at the second reading or at some point in the future, there would still be a final that would come through Planning Commission again, and then back to City Council before any construction could actually happen. So I'll go through this list, but I'll say first that the staff recommendation was actually to table, but through the process of working through all the discussion with both the applicant, Planning Commission questions, this is what ended up as the Planning Commission recommendation. Many of these conditions actually came out of the staff report with some modifications. And then there was another condition that was added at the end that I'll explain. So the first one is just regarding building height. That's more of an FYI, but since there's a preliminary rendering, we believe that would be sufficient. So that stayed in there. And then number two has to do with the dwelling units, types, and sizes. You may recall this was a desire of the Housing Advisory Commission and Planning Commission to have some variety, so that if there are changes in demographics and market over the years in the future, then there can be different types of users for those dwelling units. So it's not a homogeneous market. But at this point in preliminary, we don't have the details on those. So that was something that was left in there. Landscaping plan, there's not full information on that yet, but we believe that that can be achieved through the final as well. Lighting, very similar. There's agreement there to provide lighting along the development and within the development, but that has not been detailed yet at the preliminary stage. Number 5, sidewalks and bike paths. This is one that probably will garner some discussion. Had a lot of discussion at Planning Commission about where the sidewalks and bike paths should be, both along the perimeter and interior. The way that the roadway was designed, the intention was that there would be a sidewalk on the north side of Lake Forest Drive, and there would be a multi-use path on the south side. And there was some discussion about sidewalk along US 27, but it was ultimately decided by Planning Commission that would not be necessary. But there was willingness from the applicant team to grant the necessary right-of-way for along US 27 to accommodate any future expansion of the right-of-way that might be necessary, even though there already is a turn lane there. And on number 6, recreational amenity there, and I will say along the lines of amenities and open space, there was quite a bit of discussion, and we did have a staff and applicant meeting prior to the Planning Commission about this very thing. And so I think there have been some revisions to that, but there will still need to be more information provided as part of the final. And next slide. This was number 7 is about the soil stability, and I think everyone felt comfortable with where this was at because of the review by Butler County. It's just a matter of getting the documentation for that. Number 8, bonding. That's a fairly standard requirement for the infrastructure, particularly whether it's public or private, that would need to be ensured that is completed according to specifications of the city. Number 9, building architecture. You saw the renderings already, but it is important that there be this condition to retain the quality of the rendering that we know to this point. Number 10, underground utilities, no problem there, but it's good to document that just from an aesthetic standpoint and safety standpoint. 11 was one that was added by the Planning Commission based on the discussion about the HOA and how those common spaces would be managed and utilized to ensure that particularly the stormwater basins, that they are not a responsibility of the city in the future. Number 12 was one, and I have a slide on the next page in a moment, but this is one that we would like to have added, which is a really small sliver of land that is actually not even adjacent to the site, but it is on the property. That would allow Magnolia Drive to be potentially connected in the future to Lake Forest Drive. In discussion with Etta Reed, with Bear Becker, The applicant's not interested in doing that at this time. So with that in mind, we're willing to have that removed at some point, but it would be good to further discuss either before the second reading or at the time the final plan comes through. And with that, I'll answer any questions you might have. Thanks for listening to the lengthy presentation, even though it was about half the length of the planning version.
You're muted, Mike.
Is there anyone from the petitioner here who would like to address council? Mr. Webb?
Can I ask some questions, just some quick clarification questions from Sam before we get into the petitioner, or is that?
Yeah, I'll let you do that.
And so just as this is just some clarification, just Sam, and this is for the rest of us, just for clarification, it's called a preliminary phase, but is this not the kind of final discretionary approval? So if there's any modifications we want to make, now's the time. Is that now the time better than the final?
If they have to do with the layout and the geometry, then yeah, I think this is your last chance. If it has to do with landscaping materials or something that is really not going to change the geometry of the site, then I would say you can delay that part.
Okay, and then some of the things, just could you provide clarification on, you had asked for tabling from the Planning Commission and they were inclined to move forward. Can you talk about what things you didn't feel like you had enough time to do, and would additional time help now? I guess clarification on that.
Yeah, that primarily had to do with the overall layout. We had some concerns about the proximity of the cul-de-sac street to US 27 as far as queuing goes. And the Planning Commission didn't feel like that was justified. And then the other one had to do with the trees and the open space and the stormwater, how all that would work together. Planning Commission didn't feel like there was, after listening to the applicant and their response, that was really necessary to delay it on that. And having looked at it, particularly the trees, it's mostly scrub and dead trees that are out there now because the roadway construction actually removed a lot of what you've seen. So those were the two main topics: the connectivity of the distance of the new street to US 27 as far as the curb cut spacing, and then also the open space and the trees.
All right, and then I'll just ask one more and stop, is that this is just one, basically this is a phase in a PUD where there are other phases coming down the pike potentially on Lake Forest Drive. So for example, have cumulative traffic studies been done? Like if we look at the intersection of 27 and Lake Forest Drive, we're weighing this in relation to this phase. Do we know what likely traffic generation there would be on Lake Forest Drive that may require intersection improvements in the future that we should be planning around? Do we have those kind of numbers or a sense of what that might be?
Off the top of my head, I know a traffic impact was done. I don't know what the parameters that were put in as far as if it anticipated the entire development or just this one development. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Okay, I guess my last question is that if we anticipate that there would be future changes to like an intersection, we'd be planning around this now rather than handling that either at the final or in a subsequent.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Webb, is there anything you'd like to add?
Sure, I have a couple slides for you also. I guess Jessica's in charge of that this evening. Okay. Well, I appreciate council's time here this evening, taking a look at our proposal for the new Lake Forest condominiums. Before we forget, I want to address something Mr. Prithert questioned regarding this being phase one of a larger PUD. This is not phase one of a larger PUD. We just kind of named this phase one of what's going to happen on Lake Forest Drive, but this is a standalone PUD that just affects the 12 areas, the 12 acres that the application describes and that staff went over here. So there'll be future subdivision development, maybe future PUDs elsewhere. This property, as you may recall, started as 190, 175 acres. So there'll be future development, but what is on the table this evening is a standalone PUD of this condominium development. So next slide, please. So the long and short of this is that the developers and myself, being longtime residents of Oxford, have always sort of admired the success and the management of the Veriker Farms small little condo development that we're all familiar with up behind Kroger on Fairfield Road. And we have felt for a long time that this is an underserved market in the city for empty nesters, first-time home buyers, faculty. We feel that condominiums in general are an underserved market. And even though this is in an R2 zoning district where we could have duplexes or through the PUD process, other types of buildings, we wanted to stick with the kind of Veriker Farms model of individual units, individual homes. As an architect and a designer here, my first thing is how can we improve on what we liked about Veriker Farms? And we started with Veriker Farms. The garages are set very far forward. The front doors are set very far back. They don't have internal sidewalks or curbs and gutters as far as how the roads, the private roads operate inside the development. There's not really that much public lighting in that area. And we felt that the houses were simply too close together there. There's some Veriker Farms units that are 6 feet from your neighbor. We sort of said, let's start with doubling that at 12 feet between each residence. We did some preliminary planning of the units themselves and basically tried to figure out how the best way to place them on the site would be. And then also wanted to create this notion of having a sense of community, a sense of neighborhood. So we sort of adopted this notion of kind of having a style, and we sort of chose this arts and crafts kind of motif for the actual buildings here. So next slide, please. This slide kind of shows the new road, the 2 empty spaces, and our fresh new curbs and gutters that are out there. Next slide, please. And you can see how we've just simply, dropped this development in what is now the primarily cleared areas that have been left from the development of the road. As we said, as staff pointed out, we're looking at doing less than half the density that would potentially be allowed here. We are working with, if you can kind of see, there's a faint green line to the sort of top left corner. That's actually a 100-year flood line that takes up quite a bit of this property. We have the pond on the other side of the street. And then I'd like to maybe address a little bit one of Mr. Prithrick's other questions regarding the tabling. When the staff report came out, it was unclear the right of way that was going to be needed for the US 27. Once staff sort of suggested that the US 27 would need the whole 120 feet, we had a few days and were able to simply push our cul-de-sac back. So by the time we got to Planning Commission, 2 of their concerns, the location of the cul-de-sac, the right of way for US 27, and I had neglected to show sidewalks on our side of Lake Forest Drive as part of this, we were able to have that corrected by the time we came to Planning Commission. So, some of staff's concerns where they thought perhaps redesign was going to be necessary. And if redesign were necessary, certainly, it would need to be tabled, but because we were able to solve the problems, Planning Commission seemed to feel that we had addressed them adequately in order for us to move forward here. So this is designed as a private development. These are not public streets, though Mayor Becker is always involved with us here and makes sure that fire department turning radiuses, emergency vehicle turning radiuses, all of those things are accounted for. So the development is kind of based on all of the rules that come into play when we look at that. One of engineering department's concern for planning was whether or not there was enough stacking space where Lake Forest Drive meets US 27. This will address Mr. Prithrick's concern in particular. Edda, I have to say, is one of the people who were accidentally closed out of the meeting and can't seem to rejoin us, but I have her on my phone here via text, and she's reminding me that the traffic study, as we presented in Planning Commission, the traffic study was actually done for the entire development for up to, I believe it was over 250 potential residents by the time
subdivisions and everything, for the entire acreage was developed. And even at that, the stacking space that was going to be required for the intersection was only 1 or 2 cars, and we have room for, I believe, 5 at this point. So to answer Mr. Prithrick's question, the traffic study has been done. It was done with a 100% build out as its parameter, and planning and engineering, I think, are satisfied with that from the commission hearing. Lastly, this is intentionally sort of internally focused development, because we have almost 600 feet of frontage along US 27. Those could in effect be driveway lots on US 27 as a subdivision. We've chosen it instead to kind of, again, sort of use the Verica Farms model, have everything sort of internally focused, all of the buildings kind of facing inward to the neighborhood. And then the little photograph on the right is actually taken in Mason, but they do a beautiful job in Mason of creating landscape berms that provide that sort of separation and that sense of community where, there will in fact be some backyards, so to speak, on the other side of that berm. So the idea of this development in general is just to have it internally focused rather than having 20 or 30 driveways along Lake Forest Drive, to simply have these 3 access points and develop a neighborhood sort of feel here. So next slide, please. Pedestrian connectivity was a concern of planning, and is a concern obviously for all of us. As I mentioned, we added the sidewalks. Part of the design here includes a pedestrian bridge sort of to connect the 2 pieces of this development, going over what is, would be generous to call it a creek. It's kind of a swale at this point. But nonetheless, as part of our stormwater management system, now we have, in addition to a quantity of stormwater that we need to address, we also have water quality requirements and water quality structures. And the little picture in the middle on the left is a water quality structure that Bayer Becker has done elsewhere that just gives you an idea of what our intention is around this bridge area. We don't really have running water there, but the intention is to use that as an amenity, use a necessary function of the water quality feature as an amenity. The plantings and the way that these things work, it not only retains the water, but also filters the water, through natural vegetation in order to clean it and make sure our water quality is accounted for. So, and then again, kind of the berms that we would have both along US 27 and also along Lake Forest Drive. And the next slide, please. The connectivity issue, this is just a map that Bayer Becker provided that shows how the network of sidewalks here connect to the network sidewalks on South Point Parkway, following down 27, and ultimately, leading to the trail system. So that has been accounted for here. Planning agreed that this was a likely safer path than to have them go down US 27. And I had some pictures of the narrow bridges that are there, and everyone sort of decided we'd rather bring them pedestrians and bicycles not along 27, but through this alternate method here through walking paths and sidewalks. Next slide, please. The recommended conditions, I won't go through those again, other than to say that, I agree with Sam. These were sort of arrived at through a very collaborative process with Planning Commission, and we're more than happy to address these. As Sam pointed out, this is the first step of a 2-step process. We will be back, hopefully with the approval of City Council in our preliminary. The standard then is when we come back with all of the details on every tree and every sewer line and electric line and everything else, that we haven't compromised the overall scope of this development. But there's obviously lots of engineering to be done before we come back. And so we're just kind of at this point looking for sort of a buy-in to the density, to the arrangement, to the sort of the way that we've put this thing together. And hopefully you'll appreciate the work that we've done with Planning Commission. So last slide, please. So this is just some kind of pretty pictures to remind you of what it is we're trying to accomplish here. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. I appreciate your time.
All right. Let me ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to address this ordinance before council.
There is not. Thank you.
All right, then I will turn it over to council questions and discussion. Mr. Prithridge, Mr. Brackett.
So I want to start out by saying that I think that as a community who has the goal of finding more housing just in general, more diverse housing options, especially those that are geared to a wider diversity of people and not just the student population. I think people are happy to see that coming down the pike. And I think that this developer, were he to be the one to actually build these units, I think there's a great deal of respect for the quality of the product that they're able to do. And so I think in general, I support that, and the fact that he owns the property and has the zoning, he has it by right. I mean, to subdivision or at least. Our job, however, is to make sure that the development fits as best it can with our comprehensive plan and our goals and our priorities. And I will say, ideally, I love Verica Farms because it does everything you say, but it's infill development that maintains our small town character. This development is at the very fringe of town along one of our major highways. And so it's not an optimal location for the kind of housing that you describe. So I think our job is to try to figure out how to make it fit best. And I think the PUD allows us to do that. So some of the things that I'm kind of interested in talking about, I totally appreciate that the Planning Commission put a long night in to look at this. I totally appreciate that their desire was to move it along. But planning, the preliminary phase is the last chance you get to have a substantive say either in the layout or in the conditions. So I feel like as a counselor, I want to make sure that I appreciate that they didn't table it. They didn't feel like it was necessary, but I know that these are forever decisions. So some of the things that I'm concerned about, I'll list them. First is I want to make sure that how do we make this development as connected to the rest of Oxford as we can, given the circumstances. And so there are a couple of different ways. I completely support the Planning Commission's recommendation that there be a multi-use path or a bicycle and or pedestrian connection. I'm really curious as to where that's going to be and how we can ensure it happens as part of this development and not depend on another phase of development. Because I believe that our complete streets policy would likely apply to this. And so how's a person on a bicycle going to travel from this development back into town? So I think we need to think about that connectivity. I think we need to think about the connection that Sam made. Will the person be able to access Magnolia Drive from Lake Forest? It's within our scope in the PUD. We need to look at the PUD, but we need to look at the secondary consequences. Like if this development creates a demand for pedestrians who need to walk then and connect over to Magnolia, now's the time to deal with that. I think the Planning Commission, for example, I understand why they didn't think a sidewalk was necessary at this time on 27, but I think a sidewalk will become necessary in the future. So I would hate to have missed the opportunity to make sure we not only maintain the right of way, but that we also make sure the developer provides some funds that would contribute to that in the future. And then the other major thing I really want to talk about is that intersection, whatever the traffic demand shows, the residents of Lake Forest Drive will demand a traffic signal at that intersection at some point in the future, just because of the nature of it. And I think that it would be unwise for us not to think about the development in light of that need in the future. So I understand why they feel like, and the Planning Commission felt like putting the cul-de-sac quite that close was fine. I'm concerned, about whether indeed putting a cul-de-sac street so close to what will ultimately be a signalized intersection is a wise choice to make in the here and now. And then also, I believe that I don't think that signal, the burden of paying for it shouldn't fall on all of the citizens of the city of Oxford. I think this development should help support future development, even if that's just money in escrow. So those are some things I'm really curious to talk about. I Also, just I know the Planning Commission talked about it. The fact that these houses are built nearly on top of Lake Run, some of them is a concern for me, wasn't for the Planning Commission. So anyway, those are some things that I think I'd like to hope that we can resolve so we can feel good about this development moving forward, that it provides the most connectivity possible, for example, that makes provision for those infrastructure improvements that it generates the need for. Even if we don't need a light now, how would it contribute? So yeah, I just want to make sure we get this right.
Right. Mr. Bracken.
Yeah, I expressed some of those concerns as a member of Planning Commission. And a lot of that stuff were things we were working through. One thing I wanted to address is the sidewalk, which seemed like a good idea, but we thought it would be constricted where Lick Run runs over the road. And so it actually seemed like it'd be more dangerous, but we had talked about connecting it to Magnolia Drive on the other side and that being a better path. So as long as that happens, for that aspect, I'm in support. One of the things I'm still concerned about though is in the northern portion where it's listed, depending on which map, as open space or water quality basin, there were some concerns about the soil there and leakage. And also, if possible, I would love to retain that as forest because it's the only forest left on this property, and it also provides wildlife corridor and a riparian buffer. So unless we need that basin for water quality and it functions that way, I would prefer that state forest, if we could address that.
Councilor Southern.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I maybe I missed this. I don't understand. Item number 12 is the right-of-way shall be dedicated for the triangular sliver of land between Lake Forest Drive and Magnolia Drive for potential future transportation connectivity. And then you said that that is not going to be on the final form. So I'm wondering, I would like more details about that. And if that's a good idea to not have it. First of all, I don't understand where it is and what it looks like. And then I don't understand, or perhaps I missed this, why it's not being included. So if you don't mind explaining, thank you, Sam.
Let me get Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Councilor Southern. Great question. And I meant to go to that slide and forgot to after the recommendation slide. So Jessica, if you could put my slides back up, it should be the next slide after the last ones you were showing. Yep, right there. So this one, Edna, shows the sliver and where it would be located. And I think to Councilor Bracken's point, the goal of the developer is to actually continue the sidewalk farther north up to South Point Parkway. But what we didn't catch with the Planning Commission, we didn't bring it up, and I apologize for that, is there could be an opportunity here at some point in the future to have another connection that's actually closer to the development, but there's a topographic issue there that would have to be worked through. I don't think at this preliminary stage we could do that, but having the right-of-way would help that happen in the future. Whether we do that at the preliminary or the final, it's not important to me, but I just wanted to point that out where that was. Thank you, Jessica.
Did that answer your question, Edna? Does that? You're still muted.
It was removed from the ordinance, the proposed ordinance. Is that right?
No, it's in the ordinance.
Oh, because
yeah, if you decided second reading, if for whatever reason there weren't any changes and you decided, you could just leave it in there. But I will tell you that at this point, the applicant is not willing to donate that. But we believe it is fully within your power to have it as a condition.
Here, I see Mr. Webb's hand. Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah. Yeah, this was kind of sprung on me today. I really wasn't sure or involved in the discussion with Sam. This was mostly with Etta, who I'm again dealing with via text here at the moment. But in order to, the sidewalks that would be provided are provided within the right of way. So it doesn't really affect that. The sidewalks would go up there. I guess the question at hand is, I mean, do you actually need some kind of a public easement to just simply allow a sidewalk to connect from Magnolia Drive? I mean, do you have to actually, does my client need to,
give away property in order to make this happen. We're not opposed to letting there be a pedestrian path there. There is a grade problem that would need to be worked out, but, do you in fact need to, have public right of way in that location to make that happen?
Okay, that's, we'll have to figure out.
According to Ms. Reed here, the text I just got, there's a 2.5-foot elevation difference between Magnolia Drive and Lake Forest. To connect the roads, if you were going to try to make a road connection, you would have to tear out part of Magnolia Drive to reconstruct it at a different elevation. So that's the hesitation on the commitment there. As far as pedestrian connectivity, if you remember from the map, I know we don't have it in front of us at the moment, we are connecting to South Point Parkway currently, and there's Magnolia Drive and another drive that sort of has kind of a hammerhead and just little apartment access roads or whatever to provide pedestrian access. I think would certainly be amenable to my client, but trying to give over right away or requiring extra road construction is less so.
What sticks in my mind when I watched this at planning was they were more concerned about a pedestrian bicycle connection and avoiding having a muddy cow path there that everybody had to trek over. So I think there's a way to work this out so we get some connectivity for foot traffic. I mean, I think that the theory was that somebody might want to walk from the new development up to Magnolia and then walk down Magnolia to what will be the new convenience store and gas station to buy groceries or whatever there. So let's see, I go first. Let me get Councilor Ragu and we'll come back to Councilor Southern.
Just before I ask my questions, were all of David's points addressed? Because I know you asked a few, but then, or do you want to talk about it more? Or do you want to?
I'll come back because I want to kind of dial some of that stuff in. So yeah, I would love to hear what other people have to say first.
I really like a lot of this stuff on paper. I like that there are, whenever Sam was talking about facilitating the construction of a variety of dwelling types and fulfilling the broader community goal for more affordable and diverse housing. There was another one where it says it embodies some of these principles. So I really like that idea that we're trying to diversify what type of housing is available, because I think, the biggest goal is to make sure that people who work here can also live here too. As a measure of good faith, would the developer be willing to have an overlay to make sure this doesn't turn into, so that it's permanent residence and not student housing?
Yeah, Mr. Webb, you're muted. Do you want to take a swipe at that?
Yeah, so I neglected to spend any time on the homeowners association and the governance of this thing. So that was talked about quite a bit in Planning Commission. The question that we expected to hear was, how can we make sure that this is not going to turn into rentals? And as I'm sure the law director can confirm with us, when you sign on to a homeowners association, you make an agreement, you sign on to an agreement that says perhaps no more than 10% of the entire development could be rented at one time. So the question is, how does that affect my property rights? How come my neighbors could rent their property, but because 6 other people have, I can't rent mine? Well, that's what the homeowners association does. I mean, that's for the benefit of all, the property owners. I think Chris actually pointed out in Planning Commission that lenders sometimes have problems if too many units in a condominium get rented. So we're really expecting the homeowners association to do kind of the heavy lifting, so to speak, with regard to limiting rentals and making sure that the property values are protected, and that this isn't going to turn into a Airbnb development or something like that. These are units for sale and for home ownership and for people to live in them. And the homeowners association should take care of the rest of it.
I appreciate the intent and the expectations that the right thing will happen, but there's a ton of specifications in here can there not be a specification for an overlay, which I know that other developments have done? So why rely on a group of people that hasn't even formed yet to potentially maybe not do the right thing?
Well, a couple things, the way our overlay district is written, it can't really be applied to a single property, which this is, because it's a PUD, it's a single property. So it's really just not the appropriate solution in this case.
Sure. I can't remember the name of the development where the owner who owned the huge property signed on for an overlay from the beginning. I have a hard time believing this on paper, that what is being said will actually happen, because the intent is to have diverse housing. So I think that that is a really good measure of good faith if that could happen. Otherwise, I'm having a hard time seeing how this fits into our broader goal.
So is the concern here that it could end up being rented, or, I mean, that was the reason for the overlay district, right? Was to make sure that, neighborhoods don't become student rental neighborhoods. Is that the concern here?
I mean, the big concern is that we have people staffers who work at Miami who can't afford to live here. We have young professors who can't afford to live here. We have families that can't afford to live here. So we need a diversity of housing so that we can actually have people who live here year round. So I think that—
How does limiting who can live here effectuate that?
Because the overlay would determine how many people in the house are related or unrelated.
Okay. Well, like I said, I think where we got stuck at Planning Commission on that is, I mean, you guys can certainly add conditions to this approval or whatever, but our typical overlay district is, it's a group of lots, it's generated by the neighborhood itself. So, it just simply doesn't apply here. I mean, if you would like to, try to figure out some method by which to apply that standard to this development, I guess you can do that, but the overlay isn't in it.
Right. And I think that if someone could remind me of the name of the development where where the owner of the property did have the overlay.
That was a subdivision, wasn't it?
Yeah. South Oxford Vineyard, is that what the final name was?
Sam, were you going to say something?
That's Heritage Vineyard. The overlay provisions do allow city council to waive the minimum number of lots. So I think, Chantel, to your point, if this was something that the applicant and owner were interested in restricting on themselves, then I think city council can find a way to adjust the provisions to make it apply to a single lot. But I think council also needs to be careful to not, when it gets to the second reading, is to not add a condition or a restriction that the applicant's not willing to do, because that puts us in a potential legal bind. So yeah, I think between the first and second reading, we can look into the potential waiver of the minimum number of lots and report on that. And whether it ends up as a condition or not, I may not be relevant at this point, but then that could be helpful. And then this would give time for the applicant's team to discuss whether they want to have that kind of restriction or not on themselves.
I mean, because I would be in complete support if they did end up going that route, because in essence, what it's saying is putting their money where their mouth is, that everything that is being written down on paper, that they actually intend to do that.
I also want to say that between the time that Planning Commission reviewed this and tonight, the housing study that we worked on for 10 months has been completed. So it shows that there's market support for 950 units over the next 5 years. So that ranges from under $1,000 a month rent to over $260,000 home purchase and everything in between. So I think that shows that there's market support for development. And I didn't get that into this report. It wasn't part of Planning Commission review, but there's market support for residential development.
Mr. Prithridge.
And this is just a little bit of the planning professor in me, and just so we understand the choices before us. The the developer owns the land and they have a right to develop it under the subdivision ordinance, but the planned unit development is something different, in which we kind of meet in the middle. We grant flexibility perhaps to do things that the subdivision ordinance wouldn't normally permit, but we may ask and have expectations for things that the subdivision ordinance wouldn't by law require. And it's not incumbent upon us if it doesn't, if it doesn't meet the expectations of our comprehensive plan, we can deny the PUD. They always have the option for the subdivision. I think on a piece of land like this, and for our benefit, it's good if it comes through as a PUD, but I think that we have some flexibility to ask things of them, and if it doesn't meet our comprehensive plan expectations, we don't have to approve it. So that's just kind of that's what I mean by wanting to get this right. And so if we have that, and that's just something to think about. I mean, the fact that the condition says will accommodate, I mean, that doesn't bind them at all in terms of what they may develop. And in fact, the developer could get the PUD and transfer the property to somebody else to develop it. So I think that we can't just operate on trust 100%. I think that the planned unit stages, if we have expectations, now's the time to lock them in, because there's really, you can't come back in the final stage and say, yeah, but. So if we have those kind of concerns, now's the time. Can I just ask a question to Sam about the traffic? I know that staff had concerns about the cul-de-sac roadway. Let's set aside, let's look at the development in two pieces. The part that's on the 27 side seemed to be the complicated part. Sam, can you talk to me about the traffic issues? Is it just about queuing? Is it about also the potential need for example, a turn lane? If we lock this down, what have we perhaps boxed ourselves out of in terms of our ability to, for example, improve the intersection in the future?
That analysis was all reviewed based on the traffic study that I think Scott mentioned through Etta's text. And so the city's not planning any improvements in the future. So if the city did want to do something further, it would need to do that on its own. And I think kind of a consequence of what has made Oxford sort of the small town charm is that the slow development doesn't really allow for developments that are adjacent to each other to kind of contribute to improvements together at one time. And so that ends up being realized at a later point if it's determined that it's needed. But as I said, the traffic study didn't show that. The city engineer approved it like that. There is a turn lane there that's southbound, and that is all that was required at the time of Lake Forest Drive construction. So I will say that we probably would not support curb cuts on 27 for driveways. If a traditional subdivision was proposed, we would have the power to prevent that. So that would help. So I don't think that would have been an issue if it was a traditional by right development. But yeah, I think you're right that in the future there will be a desire to have intersection improvements there, even if the traffic study does not show it at this time.
So to me, it's a question then of setting aside, making sure you don't build on the land where you might need that space, so is a house in the right or wrong place? So you leave yourself that flexibility. And the second part is, one of the things I teach my students is this idea of exactions, which is asking developers to pay for their proportional share of infrastructure needs that are generated by a development. If we don't, for example, ask the developer for any money for a particular intersection improvement now, is it just the city's bill later on? I mean, it's now our one opportunity to say, hey, can you put some money in escrow for a potential future improvement? Your fair proportion of it. Is this not the time to ask for that?
Yeah, I think you could, but I don't think the data supports it right now. So we would have to take another look at it with the city engineer if that was something you felt strongly about at the preliminary stage.
So we could have, for example, language that was that they shall contribute an amount proportional to the need generated by the development, and then that analysis could happen in between the preliminary and the final.
Well, I can't speak for the city engineer, but hopefully there would be some time. I know he's busy, but we could hopefully do that.
Okay, to me, it's just making sure that we leave, for example, the money. For example, I believe we want a sidewalk along 27. I did the math. I mean, I know people like to walk the shortest distance from point A to point B. And if somebody moves into here who wants to walk to the high school, you can either walk 1,600 feet along 27, or you can walk 3,500 feet down Lake Forest Drive. And I know what people will do. So I think that, again, for me, it's making sure we leave the easements or the rights of way where we need them, that we ask for money now when we can ask for it. And again, that's the complicated part, is the data. Like, how much would this development, what's its piece of a future intersection improvement? That's something engineer would have to figure out. But I think they should pay their proportional, they should pay their own way, is my philosophy on this, particularly since the connectivity is so important, because this development is not going to be particularly walkable. So we have to really extra pay attention to how people might be able to walk or bike to this development, so that it's not just sitting out there isolated as kind of leapfrogging sprawl. I don't want that to be that. So.
All right. I saw Mr. Webb's hand raised.
Yeah, so, I mean, these decisions are data-driven. And when this Lake Forest Drive was proposed and installed, a traffic study was required that determined what would needed to be built when the entire 175 acres was 100% developed. That resulted in a turn lane on US 27, which was installed. It did not result in a need for extra stacking space before the cul-de-sac, nor did it warrant a traffic signal when it's totally built out. So when you ask the developer, or you require, traffic studies to be done, people hire traffic studies and present them to you, the traffic study gives you the answer. I mean, I think that is the data-driven answer. I don't think there is a supposition to say, well, the neighborhood may someday want a traffic light, but that's not really a fair burden. I mean, we want this to be a data-driven decision. You have the data, we have the answer.
So does the traffic study, I drove out there, and turning left out of Lake Forest Drive onto 27 is a scary proposition because of the visibility. Did the traffic impact analysis, that was just a international, or whatever, the ITS traffic generation, was that a kind of like textbook generation, trip generation model kind of stuff?
Might have to wait for a text from Etta on that, but keep in mind this is US. But I mean, keep in mind that this is US 27 and an ODOT road. I mean, this was, this is not a half-baked traffic study that's required for a US highway.
Councilor Ragu.
Sam, earlier you said that restrictions could not be added on the second reading, so I guess it would need to happen now.
Restrictions regarding the overlay idea or something else?
We were talking about that can't be added in the final. So what we're approving is the preliminary, and that's the stage in which you can add conditions. The final is kind of only just, have they fulfilled what you required in the preliminary? And as long as they have, you kind of have to approve it.
Not that by the second reading. So we have some time to kind of dig into, okay.
All right.
And I completely agree with what David is saying about, I think people should have to pay your way. I know this person is looking at making a lot of profit, and it is not the burden of the city to finish the job for them. So they should be responsible for finishing off how it connects to the rest of the city.
Councilor Bracken.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could speak to the water quality basin I mentioned earlier in the northern open space area. What's the proposed status on that still?
I'm not sure I understand the question, just whether or not that is a designed basin at this point. I mean, it's not, so.
Well, I guess two questions. So one, there were some concerns around the soil. I don't know if that's changed or if that still holds. And also, would you be amenable to keeping the forest if the basin wasn't a requirement for water quality or the water quality conditions?
I mean, we would certainly look at it from an engineering standpoint. I mean, you know, as I'm sure you know, there's a lot of different ways to handle retention on the site and water quality. You know, if it turns out that that is not a very, excuse me, like friendly spot to put water retention, I mean, it could be handled underneath the streets and in, you know, piping under the street or something like that. And then I think, as we said to planning, and was a condition here, we work with soils engineers throughout this process with regard to soil quality, to bank stability, to all of those things. And you know, we have one on site already. They're engaged at this point, so they will certainly participate. Excuse me. But I guess to answer the bigger question is, the final is when we do the final engineering. So at this point, we've sort of targeted 2 areas for potential water retention, assuming we leave with a preliminary approval here. Then the engineering actually begins, where they'll do the full water quality and water capacity studies, stormwater management, design the systems, have those approved through staff review and things like that. So, I mean, all of that is what comes next. I mean, we just simply don't know how much water yet until we, you know, get into the final engineering of the project.
Councilor Gu, and then Councilor Southard.
And were you going to say something? Okay, my last question is there any possibility of some of the trees that are being planted to maybe consider native species? It makes sense from an environmental perspective, and also, I mean, for the homeowners too, it'll be much easier for maintenance.
Well, all of our trees, based on our new tree ordinance, are required to be selected from a list that the city provides. Assuming that the city is choosing local trees, then we're happy to use them.
Councilor Southard.
Yeah, one of the comments in this report came from the chief of police, who asked that there be plenty of light, or that light. And I wanted to ask how you have addressed that.
That's something that we honestly just sort of kicked down the road to the final. We acknowledged in Planning Commission there is a requirement for 1-foot candle. We had said in Planning Commission that we will provide street lighting. Our code is very specific that our street lights can't be more than 16 feet high. We can't have light pollution, you know, with minimum foot candle and maximum foot candles. Photometrics will be provided as part of the final. So lighting will be provided and will be in line with what the code requires.
All right, if we have no further, one more.
Just this is a question just for Jason. I watched the Planning Commission, but not all the way through. The Butler County Soil and Water District had recommended a setback from Lick Run. They had said 75 feet. In the end, there's no setback, requirement. Can you explain what kind of or Sam can answer this too. I mean, some of those units are really very close to Lick Run. And so can you guys talk about, I mean, I know that you didn't go with the 75 feet, but what was the thinking about that proximity to the riparian area and the stream, and whether that's a problem or not?
Yeah, I certainly had concerns about that, brought them up in the planning meeting, but I don't know if Sam or Scott has anything to add.
I can start with that. I think the consensus was that from Ms. Reed was that this is not a new concern that they have seen before. This is something that they're used to seeing, and through soils engineering, they're able to work through that, and they will have a report that will be done to confirm whether this is feasible. And they don't have any doubt that that report will show that this is feasible. And if it's not, then there will be a mitigation tool to remedy that, and hopefully not a redesign. But And because of that, and you may recall from watching the planning commission meeting, if you did, that there was acceptance to keep the condition the way it was worded, so that we would get that validation. So that just kind of was a double way to confirm that it would be dealt with.
Okay, and thank you. And then the very last question I'll ask tonight is that one of the things when we do subdivisions or PUDs is anticipate that what may not be developed next to a property now may be developed in the future. And so in subdivisions, we require stubs and things like that to ensure that there's some connectivity. Granted, the topography with Lick Run, I think you guys have made the analysis that there would never be vehicular connectivity if the property to the north would be developed. And so I understand why there's no there's no provision there for vehicular stubs as they might be otherwise. But is there provision, for example, that should there be pedestrian connectivity to the adjacent parcel, like through it or to the annex? Sam, you've mentioned the connectivity to Magnolia Drive, but I see there's kind of an open space between lots 15 and 16 on the property. That's a potential, just leaving a way open to adjacent. Is there any provision for an easement or something that would enable connectivity should the property to the north be developed so pedestrians could walk there even if there's no vehicular connectivity?
Yeah, there isn't an easement there between those two, but I think having it open would at least prevent the obstacle of having to demolish buildings to have connectivity. And so that would allow the two adjacent property owners, if at some decade in the future they wanted to have some kind of another bridge or connectivity through there for pedestrian or bicycle, they could do that on their own initiative, and it would not be a public or city initiated connectivity. If that's something that you wanted to have, then that's something the council would need to discuss among themselves.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons why we have so much difficulty completing connectivity, is because the stuff is privately owned and you'd have to take it in order to create that connection. And we've been really quite, reluctant to do that for good reason. But if, for example, as we did at Kramer, you asked for an easement, in Northridge, there was an easement provided. We didn't need it for 15 or 20 years, but when the time came, it was there. And it didn't require a taking. Again, it's one of those things you either do now or you pay for it extra later. It just seems like something to think about. And I guess, Mr. Webb, whether, what your thought is on that. Again, we're not asking for vehicular connectivity to the north. And I think I for one, don't need to see vehicular connectivity in Magnolia, but I want to know that public in the future can pass over. So thoughts on that, Mr. Webb?
I mean, that gap that you're looking at there, sort of as the internal road comes up, I mean,
yeah,
as a planner, you'll understand this. This is kind of like a paths and nodes kind of design. So, the intersections are kind of celebrated, with the way the paving changes. And that one was intended to be kind of a little minor public park or something. I mean, it was intended that node at that intersection would go across the street in some recreational fashion or something like that. I mean, that was by design. We left that gap. If it works out, that would be a good place for, even if it's just a hiking trail down to the creek that eventually becomes a bridge, that would be ideal, honestly. I mean, that was no accident that we put that there.
That's kind of what I was thinking. So I guess it's just a question of whether, this is a little bit different because you kind of have a landominium kind of situation here. So it's not like it would be two adjacent property owners, but would there be objection to some kind of public easement there just so we can ensure people walking to and from the development over that piece of it?
Yeah, I guess, if by easement, you simply mean that we just, dedicate an area that will not be built upon, in that regard. It's a little different than the Magnolia Drive question about, giving public right of way is kind of a different sort of discussion, but, an easement to ensure that nothing will be built at that spot so that there could be a future easement from the neighbor, then we could connect easement to easement and put a path. I'm certain we could accommodate that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. One last thing. I know it's just first reading, but it would be really helpful for staff to know if there are other counselors beyond Counselor Prithridge or Ragu about the traffic intersection, as far as the intersection of Lake Forest Drive and US 27. If that's something that anyone else felt strongly about, that would justify spending more staff time on between the first and second reading. Otherwise, we would just use the traffic study that's already been accepted. So that would be helpful for us if we knew any additional council members.
Councilor Bracken, you just.
Yeah, I would be on board with their sentiments. I was also wondering, is there any chance the traffic study took place recently during COVID in which conditions might not be normal because travel was way, way down? Just throwing that out there.
We can take a look at that. I don't think so, but we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, I would probably be interested in at least seeing the traffic study that was done, seeing that presented.
Okay, well, we will give it a look, but I can tell you it's not going to result in anything different than what's already been proposed.
Okay.
So if you want further study, we're going to need a majority of council members to spend the time on that.
Okay, let me see if I can take a little straw poll on that. Anyone who would like to see more done in the way of a traffic study for the intersection, with show of hands? Is that? Yeah.
I guess I still had some questions. I both tend to trust empirical data in these studies, but I also trust David's experience with local traffic and his knowledge and understanding. So I don't know if we need to invest in a whole new study, but I feel like there's something that needs to be investigated there.
So let me just explain what it is that I'm, and I didn't look at the traffic study, but what's often done is they're trip generation models. They make assumptions about what the land uses are, and then they extrapolate from that to calculate based on density how many trips would be generated in a day. And that's kind of like, and Mr. Webb and Ms. Reed could correct me if I'm wrong there. And so that then just generates, okay, is there a warrant for a signal and that kind of stuff? And this is not I'm not an expert in this. But again, there might be other engineering judgment that could look at an intersection and say, because of sight lines, because of traffic speeds, an intersection may be required, and so I would love a little bit more engineering judgment that's not just kind of so again, it's maybe that would determine that there would never be a need for a signal here. But again, based on visibility and speeds, if there's a possibility that the residents are going to say to us, we really need one, that we would have analyzed it, not just in a kind of a standardized way, but with some local context specific factoring in there too.
Here, let me see City Manager Elliott with his hand raised.
I just need to remind you, this is US 27 South, and we won't be able to put a signal there unless it meets the state's signal warrants. It won't be a matter of if the residents want it. It'll be if it's warranted under the state's guidelines and state's regulations.
All right, let me see the show of hands again if we want to put more analysis into that intersection for the future. Jason, you're muted. Do you want to say something else before we?
Yeah, sorry. So it would still be our expense though, should 27 eventually the state decide that we needed a traffic light there, correct? And if so, would it be possible to put it in escrow for a certain amount of years till we determine whether they change their mind on that and that expense goes back to us?
You're directing that a question to me, Jason.
Does that make sense? So if the expense could be to us, even if it's not based on our study right now, right? But they determine, the state, that a traffic light is needed there in the future, that expense would go to us. So would it make sense now to request money be put in escrow till a certain time period in which it's confirmed, no, we do not need a traffic light there? So that's that's more of a general question, I guess, or statement.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not warranted and they have a traffic study that shows it's not going to generate enough traffic to meet the warrants, I'm not sure that you he would be legally allowed to put this burden on this development. I'd have to give that some more thought.
Yeah, and I might want a legal opinion. So essentially, we would be asking the developer to escrow X amount of dollars for unknown period of time until it's determined that there is not a stoplight needed, or if there is a stoplight needed. I don't know if we can make that ask of them based on the data that we have.
So that's basically what the analysis, and maybe the traffic analysis we have is sufficient and I'm just missing something. But really what you need to answer is, at build out, what potential intersection improvements could be required? Would they be warranted? And if so, how much would they be? How much would it cost? And B, what's the proportional cost that this development contributes to it? So no, it's not like in escrow forever. I mean, we would need to have some data, but like, I guess I just want to see whether the analysis takes into context or whether it was just a trip generation model kind of thing. And so if our engineer could take a little bit closer look at it, again, it's either now or never on asking. I mean, it would make, Mr. Cunard, like if ultimately this development generates some need, can we ask, what the roughly proportional share of it would be now?
I'd like to get some more information before I give a legal opinion, and there's other aspects of me giving a legal opinion off the cuff in the context of a public meeting. So I'm not prepared to answer that question right now because there's a lot of speculation, and we need more information.
Okay. So based on that discussion, let me go back to a show of hands from council who would like to gather more data on the intersection based on Mr. Cunard.
Let me just throw one other thing out there, which is that certainly the developer in the city, I mean, there's going to be more discussions here, and there may be some mutually agreed arrangement that could exist that doesn't really implicate the law. It would be done by contract at that point. So I think that there's a lot of discussion that needs to go on in light of what council has discussed tonight, and their valid considerations and concerns. So I would also say that there's other ways to get there as well. And cooperation and agreement is always a better way.
All right. Okay, let me see by show of hands, those of us that would like Mr. Perry and the city engineer to look into the data and this intersection a little bit more. All right. Okay. All right, I think we've got a majority for you, Sam. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion or questions for the evening? All right, great discussion, everybody. We have no second readings tonight, so we'll move on to announcements and communications, and I will start with City Manager Elliott. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Yeah. Okay. I have just 3 things I want to share with you. I'll give you some information on basically a COVID-19 update. I think you all look at the same sources I do, but for the public's benefit. In our 45056 zip code, we represent about 9% of the confirmed cases in Butler County. And so this has been declining. And of course, I think we all watch the trends. The average new cases have been declining, even though there are more and more people that have COVID. But the declines are welcome news. And the other thing I think we're all interested in is the vaccine. And of course, I shared with you the Ohio COVID-19 dashboard, and it provides information for the state of Ohio as well as Butler County. And most recently, they posted the February 2nd information, and it shows that 24,108 vaccines have been given in Butler County, which is about 6.29% of our population. When you take a look at it by age, the 80 plus group now is almost 50%, and the 70 to 79 age group is about almost 20%. So those numbers are going up rather slowly, but they are going up. And of course, I think we all noticed that in the news tonight that the federal government has authorized shipping directly to pharmacies. And I think that's good news to cut out, shall we say, the middleman and get the vaccines out, because the state of Ohio, CDC publishes information on the vaccines that have been distributed and how many have been administered. And basically, as of February the 1st, we're now at 64.65% of vaccines received have been administered in the state of Ohio. And that's up from several days ago, we were just over 50%. So basically, I think you're all familiar with the schedule. And right now, as of this week, those that are 70 and older are eligible to receive the vaccine. But I don't believe locally there's any appointments available. But we encourage people in those age groups to continue checking. Let's hope we see more and more vaccines. Also, I want to share with you that the POLCO survey, the Police Services Survey, has been mailed out. And so if you are a resident and have received a postcard that basically says that you've been randomly selected in a survey about the Oxford Police Division, your response is anonymous, and we explain that we'd like to hear from them, and they're given a URL link to go online and take the survey. And if you're a resident that would prefer to have a paper survey, let us know and we can mail one out to you. So we're excited about getting the results of the National Police Services Survey, so we'll know how we're doing here locally. I think the deadline will be March the 10th, and we'll be providing results of that survey to the City Council and, of course, to the Police Community Relations and Review Commission. The last thing that I want to mention is, and I know you all are aware of this because I sent a note out, is that the city and McCullough Hyde Memorial Hospital both received the Business of the Year Award for 2020. We received the award a week ago from today in the municipal building. The mayor, the assistant city manager, and myself accepted the award on behalf of the city. You'll be happy to know we all wore our masks for the picture. We received a painting of our new municipal building that was presented to us. And of course, the chamber, I believe, has issued a news release. And as I said then, it's a great honor for the city, and of course, McCullough Hyde and all of our individual dedicated and hardworking employees in both organizations that have really stepped up to the plate during this pandemic. And I also want to recognize City Council for the decisions that you've made in regards to the COVID-19, the CARES Act funding and other funding that we provided to our local organizations. That's to be commended. So I believe it speaks well for the city and McCullough Hyde Memorial Hospital. It's what a community is all about, working together. And of course, last year has been a very turbulent year. And of course, this year looks to continue that trend. But hopefully with more and more vaccines rolling out, we'll get through this. We must continue to stay vigilant, continue masking, distancing, washing hands frequently, avoiding large crowds. And that's all I have this evening, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Dreisbach, anything you have to add tonight?
Nothing tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I will ask Chief Jones if he has anything.
Sure. Sorry to continue on at the late hour, but Doug spoke about the police services survey. I was going to talk about that, encourage citizens to take that. But I feel that I should update council. It's just been, since the students have come back, we've had some active weekends. Our officers have been uptown doing very proactive enforcement and issuing a lot of citations for liquor violations, jaywalking, traffic, mask violations, and working with bars and business owners to try to take the COVID precautions. So with that, we've been out doing that. Hopefully you don't get too much pushback from some of the things we've done. With that comes a certain amount of risk. We were excited that we've been getting an officer who's been injured for a long time back, just came back in February 1st, and we're getting another one back soon from surgery. But as we were out doing that, we lost an officer this weekend who, over a simple open container violation, became much more, and he's out with a broken arm now. So, so we were getting better staff-wise, but now we just lost another one for a while. And then just to kind of circle back around, since this was talked about a lot at council, this is something I would normally just share with the PCRRC. But back in the summer, council passed a chokehold ordinance and a need to intervene ordinance. And then the federal government had issued a presidential executive order on safe policing for safe communities. And so then that empowered the U.S. Attorney General to designate independent credentialing bodies for each state to credential each agency. And so the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services and the Ohio Collaborative became that agency for Ohio agencies. And we just received our certification for that. So to meet that executive order, and that involved policy rewrites and incorporating those things and having the law director review. So we're pleased to have just received that certification. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Newland, anything you'd like to add?
Not tonight, thank you, but I got to leave because my phone's about to die.
All right, thank you. I saw Mr. Elliott's hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one thing, and I had it on a note in front of me, and I forgot to mention it. But as part of the Chamber Award, our Assistant City Manager, Jessica, also received a Chamber Champion of the Year award. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that as well, too. So congratulations, Jessica. Thanks, Mike.
All right.
Thank you.
Chief Dethridge, you have anything tonight?
Nothing, sir.
All right, thank you. Mr. Waddell, anything you'd like to add?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
All right. We will go to Mr. Perry.
Nothing further, thank you.
All right. Assistant City Manager Green.
Good evening. Just a few things. I know it's late. One, thank you, Doug, for the kind words. It was quite the honor to receive the Chamber Champion. So thank you to everyone. But second, we had a presentation for the Elm Street development with Jobs Ohio on Friday, Mayor Smith, myself, and Miami University, and I think it went extremely well. So we now wait we thought a few weeks, but I got a phone call this morning, but it might be the end of the month. But the highest award would be $2 million. And so it would go a long way toward helping us with the Elm Street project. And that's the update I want to share with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Eaton, anything you'd like to add?
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
All right. Law Director Kennard.
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
All right. We will go around the horn and we will start with Councilor Ragu.
For the Solarize project update, so far there's been 40 homes, almost 40 homes that have signed up to get quotes, 3 businesses and 1 firehouse. And that is part of the Solarize Silverton project. So it includes a few different municipalities, but of all of those, Oxford basically makes up 25% of all of them. So we have 10 houses so far, 1 business. I know Jason is working on his own really cool solar projects. I won't steal his thunder on that, but it's going really well. And people still have until March 1st to sign up. And there's so many people that have signed up that they have gotten a 20% discount by buying in bulk.
Fantastic. All right. Councilor Ellerby.
Nothing, thank you.
All right. We will go to Vice Mayor Snavely.
I just want to thank Dave Prithurch for agreeing to sub for me. I appreciate it. Secondly, I really want to congratulate and recognize Chief Jones and the Oxford Police Department. They've really done an excellent job. It's been noticeable. They've had foot patrols. They've got cruisers going down the alleys and checking on things. And I think that combined with the message board has made a difference. And so I've just noticed anytime I'm uptown, almost everybody on the street now, even in lines, are wearing their masks. And I think it's going to have a positive impact. So thanks, Chief. Very much appreciated.
All right. Councillor Southard.
Regarding vaccinations, I'm so glad that they are rolling out. And I understand, I have friends who have gotten vaccinated at Kroger's in Oxford and at McCullough Hyde. And the survey that the Butler County Board of Health encouraged us, and the city encouraged us to fill out, has resulted in, they're very, very good. I had my vaccine last week, by the way. And it's like nothing. It's painless. It's a little prick, and I really hardly felt it. And the Butler County Board of Health their rollout was extremely efficient. I had no side effects at all, but I do know some people who had a sore arm for a little bit of time. So I hope that everybody who is eligible will get the vaccine. We need to encourage people to get the vaccine. And the event that Butler County Board of Health did at the Hamilton Fair, at the fairgrounds in Hamilton, was beautifully organized. There was hardly any wait. The whole thing took about under a half an hour, and that includes the 15 minutes that you were supposed to sit there and wait while you were sure that you were fine and not going to go into shock or anything. So it's very, very efficient. I know that they're rolling out more every week. I know that there is one, for instance, tomorrow, because people are getting calls and emails about it as soon as they're eligible. So be patient, please. Don't panic. People initially were trying to panic, were panicking, and they've been doing really a good job as best they can. They can't vaccinate people if there are no vaccines available. And so that was one of the problems. And it wasn't the Board of Health's fault or Kroger's fault or McCullough Hyde's fault. They just didn't have vaccines, but they're coming. Things are improving. And so all I can say is please get your vaccine when they encourage you to get it, and don't panic about it. The second thing I wanted to talk about briefly is the road work that is planned for this summer. My street is on the list, and many of my neighbors had many questions. And so I compiled their many questions and sent it to City Manager Elliott and to the Director of Public Services, Mike Dreisbach. And Mr. Dreisbach did a wonderful job answering those questions very clearly and very quickly. But I think that we really do need to have more information on the site, if we can, about how it all works, because people don't seem to know. They don't understand what they're supposed to do. They don't even seem to realize that the gutters, curbs, and sidewalks are their responsibility. And in the past, we've talked about the necessity of shoveling your walks. This is part of it. It's your responsibility. It's the property owner's responsibility to take care of these things. But people seem to be quite surprised and confused about how it all works. So I just asking, first of all, I want to thank very much Mr. Dreisbach for his excellent answers. But secondly, I'd like to ask if it's possible to get information as early as possible on the website, because people seem to have been terribly surprised that they needed to take care of this, and that the concrete work needs to be done before the roads are repaired. So the sooner we can get this information out, the better. And I mean, not of course, we on who work with the city and local government know that just because it's on the website doesn't mean people are reading it. But at least, you know, we can say, well, it's on the website. So that's my suggestion for that. And I thank you very much for your attention to that. That's all I have today. And I really encourage everybody to get that vaccine when your turn comes up. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councilor Bracken.
Yeah, thank you, Edna. I agree with all of that. And since Chantel brought it up, I'll talk about it a little bit with the ideas around solar. So I will be reaching out to different charities in town, and I've already reached out to several. And I had the idea of trying to help these charities fund for solar because it does a couple of good things at once. It helps with climate change and the environment, but also it will help sustain the charities for decades to come by lowering their overhead costs for years and years and years. And so it seems like a natural thing to do where it's feasible. And so I've already talked to a few charities and we're hoping to expand that, but we're just getting started. So I look forward to that. And I just wanted to stay vigilant with COVID, keep following all the rules. And like Edna said, when your turn comes up, if you're eligible, please do get vaccinated.
Thank you. Councilor Prithridge.
Do this in 10 seconds. Really just want to thank and commend Mr. Perry and Mr. Moore, who's not here, and the community development staff for the excellent work they do in helping us review and work through these complicated procedures. It's a lot of time we spend, but these are forever decisions. So I appreciate the high quality of service that we get from our community development department.
All right, thank you. I just have one quick thing. Remind everybody that it's Black History Month, and Enjoy Oxford has assembled a very nice Black History tour for Oxford. So I encourage everybody. You can do it from your car if you want because it's cold, but it's excellent. And Oxford has had some very significant roles in civil rights and Black history. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Prithridge, second by Vice Mayor Snavely. Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll so we may adjourn?
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.